Michael and his wife are moving in with their 7 grandkids. You'll be sleeping in a 70-square-foot storage shed."
Robert said. I couldn't help but gape in shock.
"There's no fulfillment in doing housework and living with just another elderly person. Now you'll have plenty of chores and grandkids to take care for again."
It seemed he was treating me like a mere servant, but I had plans of my own. I packed my bags. "Grandma?" That was Lisa's voice, clear as a bell. I felt sorry for these kids getting dragged into this mess. "Just wait a little, okay?" I told Lisa and left the house. I was determined to create a happy environment for these kids. This was just a ceasefire. I resolved to work with Michael and fight to reclaim our happiness. I am Elizabeth, turning 72 this year. I married Robert and we were blessed with 2 children, our son Michael and our daughter Emily. I met Robert at work. After his persistent pursuit, we started dating and got married. However, my parents were strongly against the marriage. I left home in a whirlwind, almost like eloping. But after a while, Robert's gentlemanly behavior during our courtship days disappeared. He turned into a typical male chauvinist, expecting me, a woman, to naturally handle all household chores and care for him and the kids. He never once changed the kids' diapers. As the children grew, his mindset influenced them too. He spoiled Michael, our eldest, saying he could go to any university and do whatever he wanted. But for Emily, our daughter, he declared, education is useless for women, and denied her college education. Heartbroken, Emily gave up her dream of studying further. Without the permission to work, I had no savings. I apologized to Emily, but she said, "I know what Dad is like, and it's okay. I'll make it on my own." Years later, Emily studied in Canada and married a local. We rarely meet, but she has found happiness on her own terms, just as she promised. Even if the parents are flawed, the children can still grow up strong. I'm deeply grateful for that. Michael, after graduating from college, got a job at a local company. He seems busy, but seeing him work so diligently makes me feel proud of his growth. Years later, one day, my husband and I received a request to talk from Michael. He seemed serious. I wondered if he wanted to quit his job or if something was bothering him. However, what Michael said next was completely unexpected.
"I want to get married,"
he announced, a wonderful surprise indeed. But I hadn't sensed any signs of this. I never heard about him dating anyone. Curious, I asked, "Who is she?" Michael shared about her with a bit of shyness. I was concerned about Robert listening silently beside us. Would he impose the same archaic expectations about women and household chores on Michael's wasn't unthinkable, given how Robert always prized Michael. Though I had remained silent in the past, I was ready to confront Robert if it meant protecting my children's happiness. Fortunately, my worries proved unnecessary. Robert didn't interfere with Michael's marriage. Instead, he quietly observed their happiness. Michael's wife Karen turned out to be a wonderful woman, kind to us, and even engaging Robert in conversation, which he seemed to enjoy. Michael and I felt relieved seeing this. "You've found a great wife," I commented. Michael beamed, saying,
"I think so too."
Their happiness was evident. Soon, it took a more tangible form.
Karen is pregnant.
Michael informed us. Grandchildren followed, and before we knew it, Michael and Karen were blessed with 7 children, becoming a large family. Robert generously supported them, frequently giving money for education and living expenses.
I can't accept this much every time.
Michael would protest, but if Michael refused, Robert would give it to Karen. The frequency of this generosity concerned me. Robert, if you keep giving money like this, we'll run out of living expenses. We haven't done much for Emily, yet you give Karen money so often. Can't you think it over? However, Robert reacted more angrily than I expected. We didn't speak for about a month. The Michael family, sensing the tension, felt guilty.
Sorry for causing a fight.
Michael apologized. I don't blame Michael's family at all. But Michael said, I'll refrain from coming to the house for a while. I also asked him to do so until Robert calms down. Years later, after Robert retired and Michael's children grew up, our marriage was reduced to minimal conversation, following that fight. Since then, Robert never gave money to Michael's family in my presence, but he apparently often went to their house to give Karen money. I guess it's his only joy in old age. Aware of this, I chose to turn a blind eye to avoid further arguments. However, one day, Robert suddenly suggested,
What about living with Michael's family? The grandkids are many, and eventually this house will go to Michael. It might be good for them to get used to this area now.
The idea wasn't bad, but would Michael's family agree? There are still young children in elementary school, and moving them isn't practical. Plus, our house, despite being larger, might not have enough rooms for everyone, potentially making it cramped with more people. I explained this and gently declined the cohabitation. I think Karen is a good person as Michael's wife, but that's partly because we maintain a distance. However, Robert didn't accept my view. One day he went out and returned with a lot of luggage, as if he'd taken a drastic measure.
I'm home,
he announced. Welcome back. What's with all the luggage? I asked, only to see Michael's family entering our house behind him. Michael wasn't there, but Karen and the grandkids, looking anxious with large bags, were. Hi, Elizabeth. We'll be in your care from today, Karen said cheerily. I was taken aback.
We're moving it with Michael and his 7 kids. I've decided you'll be sleeping in a 70-square-foot storage shed.
He said, entering the house with the luggage. Wait a minute. Didn't I say that's impossible? Does Michael even know about this? I asked.
Michael was at work, so I left him a letter. There's nothing impossible about a family living together. It's spring break now, so it's a good time,
Robert said with a smirk.
You also got a new room in the storage shed. Huh. There's no fulfillment in doing housework for just 2 old people, right? Now you'll have plenty of chores and grandkids to care for again.
He added, Such a thing.
Don't think your opinion will always prevail.
I stood there, dumbfounded. But what shocked me more than Robert's usual selfish behavior was Karen's reaction. I had always thought of her as a nice person, Michael's wife, but she just chuckled at my dismay. Looks like you'll be busy from now on, Elizabeth, she said. I bristled at her comment. Were they both treating me like a servant? I had my own plans. I left them there, buzzing with excitement, and silently went back to my room to pack my things.
What are you doing?
Robert asked. Since my opinion doesn't matter in this house, I'll be returning to my parents' home, I replied.
What?
Robert stood there, stunned. I vaguely heard him and Karen complaining, but it all sounded like noise to me. But just as I was about to leave the house, "Grandma?" I clearly heard Lisa's voice. The poor kids, caught up in all this. "Just wait a little," I told Lisa and left. That night, I got a call from Michael, who had just returned from work.
Mom, are Karen and the kids with you? When I got home, I found a note saying they had moved to your place, but no one's home, and Karen isn't answering her phone.
He sounded panicked. I calmed him. They must be fine. Everyone's at the house, but I have left, so I don't know the current situation.
Huh?
I explained the situation in detail to Michael. I had refused to live together. However, to silence my objections, Robert brought everyone over without my consent, trying to force me into the shed and treat me like a servant. I couldn't stand it and left. But I was worried about the grandchildren. Surely, they too were brought over without having to understand the situation.
I'd refuse to live together too. The kids didn't want to change schools, and I've seen enough of Dad to know living together would burden you, Mom.
Michael said with a sigh.
I need to convince Karen to understand and bring everyone back home.
I nodded. I have an idea. Michael seemed interested. I shared my plan with him. You must be tired from work, but can you help me?
Of course,
he replied. Then I'll contact you again. Rest well for tonight. I informed Michael of this and ended the call. I set down my mobile phone and sighed. It looked like I was in for a busy time. As I pondered this, someone entered my room and spoke to me.
Do you think the plan will work?
Yes. Thank you for helping, Dad, I responded. The man smiled satisfactorily. He was my father, Joseph, a landlord of this area.
I told you not to marry that man. Now you're back at this age.
He chided. Well, you stopped saying that once Emily and Michael were born, I retorted, laughing together. I had left home almost like an elopement due to their strong opposition to my marriage. But after my children were born, I understood the value of parents. By then, I had to come to understand my parents' feelings of not liking Robert. I had secretly returned home once to introduce my children to them. My dad, initially angry at my return, quickly softened at the sight of his grandchildren.
Come back whenever you're in trouble,
he had said. Though we weren't close with our relatives, parents are always parents. Robert didn't know, but my parents had paid for Emily's study abroad. He thought he had funded it, but he only contributed 30%. He was a fool to think that the little amount covered it all. I decided to rely on my parents for this matter and returned to their house. It felt shameful to depend on my elderly parents, but I was ready to do anything to protect my children and grandchildren. They understood my feelings. Dad had a simple solution.
Just kick them out.
And so began my counterattack based on Dad's strategy. The next morning, I went to the office to get divorce papers and returned home. Robert, seeing me return, smirked.
Did you spend the night outside? The shed would have been better.
I ignored him and looked towards the kitchen, hearing water running. I thought Karen might be cleaning, but it was my granddaughter, Lisa, a primary school student. Where's Karen? Why is Lisa cleaning up? I shouted at Robert in frustration.
Lisa is a girl. She should be able to do housework.
He responded nonchalantly. Angered by his words, I retorted, "Karen is the woman here, isn't she?" She must have noticed my voice. Lisa closed the faucet tightly and smiled at me with relief. "Welcome back, Grandma." "I am back. Sorry. Where's Karen?" "Mom's still sleeping." I was surprised again. Sleeping? It was already past 9 a.m. "Did you make breakfast, Lisa?" "No, Sarah did before she went to club activities, but it's always like this. I'm in charge of cleaning up." "I see. Good job." Although I praised her, I was shocked. What had Karen been doing all this time? Making the kids do all the housework while she did nothing. These doubts began to surface. "Where's Karen sleeping? I'll go wake her up." I asked Robert. Suddenly he became flustered.
She's finally sleeping. It's cruel to wake her up. She's tired from being in a new house. Let her sleep today.
Had he ever shown such consideration for me? I did want him to be kind to Michael's wife, but this seemed like pampering, not kindness. Ignoring Robert, I climbed the stairs to the second floor. "Karen, where are you?" I called out loudly. Then I heard a noise from our bedroom. With a bad feeling, I hesitantly opened the door. Karen emerged with disheveled hair. "Ah, Elizabeth, welcome back." Was she sleeping here? With Robert? My expression must have revealed my doubts. Karen awkwardly explained. "I couldn't sleep in my bed, so after Dad woke up, I borrowed his bed." It felt like an excuse. I had sometimes thought they were too close, not just friendly. Maybe I was foolish for never doubting them. I decided not to present the divorce papers I had brought. I realized there was something else I needed to do first.
"So, what are you here for? Move your stuff to the shed."
Robert, who had followed me, said in panic. "No, I came back to move my things out of the house, not to the shed," I said, taking my clothes and leaving the house. Lisa looked anxious as I left, but I couldn't do anything for her now. "Lisa, I'll be back," I assured her, pained by her obedient nod. After leaving the house, I immediately contacted Michael. I knew it might shock him. It could be a misunderstanding, but I couldn't keep silent. Michael seemed shocked over the phone, falling silent. It might be my misunderstanding, but if it's true, it's serious. We can't leave the kids in that house. Sarah, the eldest grandchild, is a middle school student. If she realized their relationship, it could deeply hurt her during these sensitive years.
"Okay, let's gather evidence."
Michael agreed. That night, after 11 p.m., I met up with Michael. He had contacted Karen. He told her to come home because it's far from work if she stays at her parents' house. But Karen refused. "Why doesn't Michael just commute from there? You can come home only on his days off." Karen and Robert must be thinking they'll have the night to themselves without Michael coming back. We contacted Sarah, the middle school student, and asked her to secretly open the house door for us. She complied, opening the door for us late at night while pretending to go to the bathroom. We entered the house and went into the shed Robert called my room. After everyone went to sleep past midnight, we heard footsteps from the living room to the bedroom upstairs. Michael and I looked at each other, waited for the bedroom door to close, and then quietly went upstairs. Standing outside the bedroom, we heard unmistakable sounds from inside. Staggering, I was supported by a pale-faced Michael. We decided and forcefully opened the bedroom door.
"What?"
"Wow! Karen and Robert, startled, hid under their blankets. Recording a video for evidence, Michael stood by as I said, "Do you realize what you're doing? Disgusting! Who should leave this house? Think about it." "Wait, it's not what it looks like," Karen protested from under the blankets. But Michael, with a cold expression, kept recording, saying nothing.
"Stop the video!"
Robert pleaded in panic, but Michael didn't respond, muttering,
"Divorce. I won't think of you as dad anymore."
His words were justified. I couldn't consider such people family anymore. Not wanting to wake the children with more noise, we decided that gathering evidence was enough for the night. Michael and I say to them, "Sorry to interrupt." "Continue, why don't you?" we said, leaving the bedroom. Michael sighed deeply, and all I could do was pat his back. The grandchildren were sound asleep in the living room. Neither of us could sleep, nor could we leave the kids and go back home. "You should go home and rest," I suggested, but Michael shook his head, watching the children sleep. The next day, I had Emily pick up the kids. She had hurried back from abroad after hearing from my father that I was kicked out. When she said she would take them to the amusement park, the kids were thrilled. It had been a while since Emily and the kids met, but she, being childless, adored her nephews and nieces, and they were attached to her, so they happily left with her. Left with just 4 of us in the house, we placed the divorce papers in front of Robert and Karen, demanding they sign. Karen began to sob, and Robert looked pale and frozen. "What are you doing? Write it quickly," I urged. Robert pleaded.
"I'm truly sorry. The shed thing was a joke, and yesterday I just got carried away."
His ramblings sounded like excuses, which I didn't want to hear.
"Who cares about getting carried away? You hit on your son's wife. Disgusting old man."
Michael spat.
"And you? Karen, write it now."
Karen burst into tears at his words. "I'm sorry. I really regret it. Let's go back home and live together again." But Michael's heart was unmoved. In fact, he laughed and said,
"Go back where? You don't have a home anymore."
Karen stopped crying and started trembling.
"The house will go back to Mom. It was originally her house,"
Michael declared. I smiled at his words. The house Michael had been living in was built on land my father had given to me as a wedding gift to Michael.
"I can't let Robert know I gave you the house. He may not be my favorite, but he's your dad. I did this on my own. No need to tell them," Dad had said. Michael and I kept it a secret to maintain Robert's dignity. Michael was grateful and had thanked Dad. "Sorry, I can only do this much for my grandchildren,"
Dad had said, embarrassed but clearly happy. Such a stark contrast to grandparents who exploit their grandkids. So, the land and the house were in my name. I then revealed another fact Robert didn't know. "By the way, the land this house is built on is also Dad's. I'm leaving, so either buy the land or return it as a vacant lot, okay?" I said cheerfully, and Robert turned even paler. This land was also given by Dad as a celebration of Michael and Emily's birth. Robert thought I had severed ties with my family, but in fact, Dad was the real owner. There's no way Robert, a stranger now, could use it without any relation. That's exactly what Dad meant.
"Elizabeth in a shed? Unthinkable. Take the land back. If they divorce, he has no reason to stay."
Acting on Dad's words, I initiated the divorce proceedings. "Taking away the house when you have kids to raise is too harsh. Are you still Dad?" Karen started yelling, but she seemed to be misunderstanding something.
"What are you talking about? The kids aren't going with you. I'll take custody,"
Michael said. "What did you say?"
You, making the kids do chores and disregarding their feelings won't get custody. They're old enough to have their say. We can take it to court if necessary.
Karen couldn't respond to his words and just looked down. Robert, still overwhelmed by despair, couldn't move. Seeing the two of them like that, Michael and I exchanged glances and smiled. It seemed they had taken quite a hit. Eventually, they signed the divorce papers and we successfully divorced with evidence of infidelity. Michael and I received compensation in the divorce settlements. We reclaimed the houses. Michael's house became a rental property, and my former home with Robert was demolished to become a coin parking lot. Karen returned to her parents' house, where her brother's family lived, likely feeling uncomfortable after her years of slacking. Robert, with his remaining retirement savings, rented an apartment, unbeknownst to him, also owned by us. It would be interesting to see how long he could afford the rent. The grandchildren, who had a great time at the amusement park, returned to my parents' house and slept soundly. With plenty of space, each child got their own room. Although it was out of their school district, they could still attend their original school with an application. They quickly grew fond of my parents, calling them great-grandma and great-grandpa. Our large family made my parents happy. Maybe it was for the best that Michael, the grandkids, and I all lived at my parents' house. Although the household chores increased for me, it wasn't difficult. Seeing the kids play and do their homework gave me strength, and everyone naturally helped out.
"We hated being forced to do chores before, but if it helps, Grandma, we want to do it,"
they said, which moved me to tears. Helping out should be voluntary, not forced. That's real education. I feel so happy now, buying donuts and sweets with my grandchildren, enjoying them with my parents. This life is a true blessing.
Grandma, it's hot in here. Let me out of the room. No way. I'm gonna go shopping now. You're gonna stay here and watch the house. As the daughter attempted to leave the room with her mother-in-law, she was gently shoved back in. The 5-year-old daughter, who usually attends kindergarten, has to rely on her in-laws on Sundays when work comes up unexpectedly. Thus, the daughter was left in the care of her grandmother-in-law, who, though she took her in, didn't seem inclined to look after her. The room into which the grandmother-in-law pushed the girl was originally used by her husband. Now it's more like a storage room, with nothing suitable for a child to play with. Additionally, it's on the second floor with a large window, making it feel stuffy even with the window open due to the heat. Today, a heat stroke warning was issued, and the sealed room had surpassed 95 degrees Fahrenheit. In such conditions, the grandmother-in-law cheerfully grabs the air conditioner remote. "Time to save some energy," she declares without hesitation and presses the button to turn off the air conditioner. She then slams the door shut and blocks it with a pile of magazines so the girl can't leave the room. My name is Alice. I'm 32 years old. I live in an apartment not far from my in-laws' place with my husband, David, who's 3 years older than me, and our 5-year-old daughter, Summer. My father-in-law passed away less than a year after Summer was born. Currently, my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law, April, live together in the in-laws' house. April, in her 20s, lived on her own, but returned home after the death of our father-in-law to take care of her mother. Being close in age, April and I get along like real sisters. Though I have a good relationship with April, and we meet regularly, I can't say the same for my mother-in-law, who is the head of the household. She dotes on her son and daughter, and seems jealous that I stole her son by marrying him. When I was pregnant, her demeanor changed drastically upon learning the baby was a girl. "Why is it a girl? I was ready to spoil a boy rotten, but a girl? What a letdown!" she exclaimed loud enough for the unborn baby to hear. I was too shocked to respond. At that time, David scolded her, saying, "Mom, why say such things when we're welcoming a new family member? It's your first grandchild, gender doesn't matter." But his mother just sulked without showing any remorse. Later, April came to apologize, saying, "Alice, I heard Mom said some terrible things. I'm really sorry." Because of such incidents, my mother-in-law treats not only me but also little Summer as a nuisance. David and April try to correct her behavior, but it's been to no avail. As both David and I work, we sometimes have to leave Summer at the in-laws. But watching my mother-in-law's daily attitude, I just can't fully trust her. She doesn't think highly of Summer, and before I married David, I heard from him that she once almost let her dog die by leaving it in a room with the air conditioning turned off during the peak of summer. Back then, my father-in-law was still alive, and he immediately noticed and took the dog to the vet, saving its life before it later passed from old age. Despite being severely scolded by my father-in-law at the time, my mother-in-law didn't seem to be truly remorseful, which is why I can't help but worry that she might inadvertently do something again. Right now, it's the height of summer. The heat is so intense that even adults are struggling, so naturally, a 5-year-old like Summer needs air conditioning in this scorching weather. That's why every time I leave her at my in-laws during the summer, I make sure to remind them to keep the air conditioning on. Despite the risk of heat stroke, every time I mention it, my mother-in-law sighs in exasperation and says things like, "Goodness, what a waste of electricity." Each time, I'm left feeling cramped and uncomfortable. It's April, my sister-in-law, who comes to my defense against such snide remarks from my mother-in-law. "Don't say that to Alice, Mom. The AC isn't a waste in the summer, right? If we're all in the same room, one is enough. Besides, you leave the electricity on for things you're not even using," she says. "Oh, really?" my mother-in-law responds. "Yes. Just yesterday, you left the TV on without watching it. And after your bath, you left all the lights on in the bathroom and the changing room. If you're gonna preach about saving electricity, you should start with yourself," April points out. I'm aware of my mother-in-law's bad habits, but it seems unlikely they'll ever change. Ignoring her grumbling, I'm grateful to April for gladly looking after Summer. April works a job with little overtime and always steps up to care for Summer. Summer has been attending daycare since she was 3 and isn't frequently left with my in-laws. I try not to rely on them because of my mother-in-law's attitude, but depending on the time of year, David and I often work late, and sometimes we get called into work unexpectedly on weekends. When that happens, and daycare isn't open on Sunday, we have no choice but to ask my in-laws for help. One late July Sunday, both David and I had work commitments and had to go to our respective jobs. David knows my mother-in-law doesn't think kindly of me or Summer and is always considerate. But on this day, we had no choice but to have my mother-in-law look after Summer. "Be good at Grandma's house, okay?" I said to Summer, patting her head after waving David off. "Okay, I understand." She nodded meekly but wouldn't look up at my mother-in-law. She's always been an easy child, but seeing her go into the house, obediently following my words, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. I could tell that even at her young age, Summer felt disliked by my mother-in-law, which made me feel sorry for her. "I'm sorry. I'll try to finish work as early as possible and come to pick up Summer. And there's a heat advisory today, so please take care of yourself. Turn on the AC early and stay hydrated. And make sure you drink your tea, Summer," I said. Recently, the temperatures have been exceeding 86 degrees Fahrenheit, but today it was especially hot. With this heat, my mother-in-law should not hesitate to use the AC, but when I stressed it, she clearly showed her annoyance. "I know that. Geez, having to look after that child in this heat. I wish you'd consider my situation a bit," she complained blatantly. Sorry. I apologized and bowed my head, determined to finish my tasks quickly and pick up Summer as soon as possible before leaving my in-laws' house. But later, I would regret not being more alert to my mother-in-law's attitude. 3 hours after leaving Summer, I finished work and was heading to my in-laws when I received a call on my cell phone. It was from Summer. Before leaving her with my in-laws, I had given her a child's cell phone, just in case. "Hello, Summer?" I answered with a sense of foreboding. "Mommy," came her frail, frightened voice. "Hey, when are you gonna come get me?" "I'm on my way now. I'll be there soon, just wait for me," I reassure her as I walk down the sidewalk. Then, with a voice that seems rushed, Summer says, "Please, come quick." Something feels off. When I ask her what's wrong, she falls silent. As I begin to sweat despite the heat, worried that my mother-in-law might have done something to Summer, she pleads with a tearful voice, "Mommy, help." Realizing this is no small matter, I rush to my in-laws' house without waiting for further details from Summer. Upon arrival, my mother-in-law is nowhere to be seen. Possibly out shopping. But Summer's shoes are at the entrance, she must be inside. She's not on the first floor, so I go upstairs and see a pile of magazines blocking a door. It's the room David used to use when he lived at home. With a bad feeling, I quickly remove the magazines and open the door. Only to be faced with a shocking situation. Sometime later, my mother-in-law returned home in high spirits. It was 3 hours after I had left Summer at their house. However, seeing an ambulance parked in front of the house and someone being carried into it, her expression instantly changed. "What the heck is going on here?" she screamed, running over to us with a look of horror. David had just arrived, so all three of us, including Summer, were there. Then my mother-in-law shoved us aside and screamed towards the ambulance. "April! Oh, why? What happened?" Yes, it was April who had just been rushed into the ambulance. Limp and unresponsive to her mother's cries. "Why is it not Summer but April who is in this state?" My mother-in-law, failing to understand, glared at Summer clinging to me. I felt a surge of anger at her attitude, but David stepped forward before I could respond. "So it was your doing, Mom." "Eh? What are you talking about?" She feigned ignorance, looking away. "Don't play dumb. We know you turned off the AC and locked Summer in the room," I pressed. Caught, my mother-in-law seemed to realize her mistake and began to stutter. I had just heard from Summer that my mother-in-law had intentionally locked her in the upstairs room and turned off the AC. The upstairs room gets much hotter than downstairs, reaching over 95 degrees when sealed. She must have known what could happen to a 5-year-old in such conditions. Her actions were beyond mere harassment, and I was horrified. Despite Summer's pleas not to stay in the hot room, my mother-in-law left her there and went out shopping. Fortunately, Summer was safe. It turned out that my mother-in-law thought she had turned off the AC in Summer's room, but she had actually turned off the one in the next room. She probably mixed up the remotes, which she is careless with and never puts back in place. There were times when the living room TV remote turned up in her room or the AC remote from her car. She used the remotes for adjacent rooms interchangeably without returning them, which likely led to this confusion. That next room belonged to April. April, who had been sleeping, was subjected to a room like a steam bath after the AC was turned off and suffered heat stroke. When the paramedics asked if someone could accompany April, my mother-in-law was the first to raise her hand. But David strongly objected. "Whose fault do you think this is?" he shouted at her. David took advantage of her momentary shock and boarded the ambulance. My mother-in-law, watching him, began to cry out. "April, hold on. Oh, if only Summer had been the one to get heat stroke instead." Unable to tolerate my mother-in-law's selfish remarks, my anger reached its peak. Before I could rebuke her, one of the paramedics scolded her, "Enough is enough. Don't you realize what happens when you turn off the AC in this blazing heat? You need to take a deep look at the seriousness of this life-threatening situation. Reflect on what you've done," he admonished. "What do you mean, don't interfere in someone else's family affairs? I never meant to kill anyone, I properly left the remote in her room." My mother-in-law retorted defiantly to the paramedic's scolding, leaving me speechless. I realized that nothing I said would make a difference to this woman, and at the same time, I knew I could never forgive my unrepentant mother-in-law. After watching the ambulance with April and David leave, I decided to take Summer back to my parents' house. My mother-in-law, unable to join them in the ambulance, apparently went to the hospital on her own later. Fortunately, April was not in danger for her life and was able to return home in good health the next day after receiving N4. Relieved that there were no lasting effects. I was just about to exhale when my mother-in-law summoned Summer and me back to her house. David also seemed to have his grievances with his mother, so the three of us went to the in-laws' house together. After such an uproar, I didn't want to bring Summer, but I couldn't leave a 5-year-old alone at home. No matter what my mother-in-law might say, I intended to protect Summer with all my might. As soon as we arrived, my mother-in-law yelled at me and ordered me to kneel and apologize to April.
If you hadn't left Summer here, none of this would have happened. It's your responsibility, so apologize to April right now, she demanded unreasonably.
Astonished by her blatant blame shifting, I calmly advised her, please don't yell. Summer is scared. But with her face red with anger, my mother-in-law yelled, shut up. I can't stand the sight of such a child. If she had died from heatstroke, maybe a boy would have been born next, hurling these cruel words at Summer.
How could you say such a thing?
I couldn't help but shout back at her while holding Summer tight. Caught off guard by my response, my mother-in-law faltered for a moment. But then she glared at us with a scowl.
Don't talk back to me. A daughter-in-law should know her place. Apologize right now.
That's when April said, what are you saying? Stop it already, stepping in front of me to shield me from our mother-in-law. It's because Summer called Alice for help that I didn't end up worse. If Alice hadn't come and called the ambulance, I would have been in much more serious condition. April said, furiously glaring at our mother-in-law. I had never seen April so angry. Our mother-in-law seemed shocked too, being yelled at by her usually doting daughter. When Summer called me for help, saying she was locked in a room, I rushed over immediately. But after listening to Summer, there were some puzzling points. She mentioned that our mother-in-law pressed something on a remote in front of her, and Summer heard a loud noise from the next room. It was assumed that the remote was used to turn off the AC, but that didn't explain how Summer was comfortably cool in her room. Then, after hearing about the noise from the next room, I had a hunch. Could our mother-in-law have mistakenly turned off the AC in April's room next door? April had said she was off today. Could that noise have been April calling for help? With that thought, even though I felt it might just be my imagination, I instructed Summer.
Summer, press the blue button on the remote.
When I arrived at the in-laws' house, I found Summer locked in the room and quickly got her out. In the next room, April was on the floor, her body incredibly hot. While waiting for the ambulance, I gave her water and listened to her story. April said she hadn't been sleeping well due to work lately. She had fallen into a deep sleep because it was her day off on Sunday, but woke up feeling unbearably hot and realized she was suffering from heat stroke. She tried to call for help with her smartphone, which was charging far from her bed, but couldn't move well due to nausea and dizziness. The AC remote, which should have been in her room, was nowhere to be found. She managed to move but collapsed after falling from the bed. The noise Summer heard was the sound of April falling from the bed. Fortunately, because I had Summer press the AC button and some time had passed, the room temperature had started to settle. However, being locked in a room that reached 95 degrees for a while, April's heatstroke had become severe. What if Summer had missed that sound? What if she thought it was just her imagination and hadn't told me? I might not have realized April was there, and in the worst case, she might have died. The thought was chilling.
Even I almost died, and you locked such a small child in that room. Don't you understand you should never do such a thing, no matter who it is? The one who should apologize is you, mother, for trying to kill your granddaughter. Consider it grace that you're not being sued for attempted murder.
April scolded with tears in her eyes, but our mother-in-law remained silent. After a while, she kept repeating because. Showing no intention to apologize, April gave her a cold look. It's no use talking to you anymore. I'm at my limit.
After Dad died, I stayed because I was worried about you, but I can't forgive you for this, and I can't live in fear anymore. I'll be moving out soon, April declared, which finally changed our mother-in-law's expression. What are you saying? Haven't I always cared for you and David? You two are my precious family, my mother-in-law protested, her face turning pale.
Who nearly killed that precious family member?
April snapped back at her, but the mother-in-law began to have a hysterical fit, banging on the table. David then said to our mother-in-law, family isn't just us. Or are you saying Alice and Summer aren't part of our family, his voice shaking with anger. To David's question, our mother-in-law snorted defiantly and looked at me with a mocking smile. They're not family, obviously. That daughter-in-law and granddaughter, they're not connected to me by blood, she said, making it clear that to her, Summer and I were never family from the start, but strangely, I wasn't as shocked as I might have been. After all, Summer is her granddaughter, there is a blood connection. But even so, I didn't feel the need to correct her. April seemed to feel the same way, sighing deeply and staring at our mother-in-law with an expressionless face.
It seems useless to say anything more. I'll be packing up and leaving soon, you'll have to take care of everything yourself after that.
April said decisively. This sent our mother-in-law into a frenzy, and she clung to April's arm, wailing and crying.
No, don't decide on your own. You're going to live here with me forever. It's you who shouldn't make decisions on your own. How about growing up and letting go of your children? I'm taking this opportunity to cut ties with you. Don't contact me ever again.
April's resolve was firm, and she shook off our mother-in-law's grip, showing her rejection.
Oh, no! April!
Seemingly overwhelmed by the shock, our mother-in-law screamed and then, carried away by her emotions, she ran out of the house. I later found out that our mother-in-law had been going around the neighborhood acting as if she was the victim, spreading rumors that it was all my fault. The next day, while out with my family, I received a call from my mother-in-law. As soon as I answered, she began to shout so loudly it hurt my ears, and I immediately wanted to end the call. Before I could ask why she was calling, she started ranting about something that had happened today. Apparently, the breaker at her house had been tripped without her realizing it, and all the food in her fridge had gone bad. It seems that everything in the freezer had melted into a huge mess. Additionally, my mother-in-law was enraged because a TV drama she had been looking forward to recording was not taped, and she was convinced that I was the only one who could be responsible.
You did this, didn't you? How far will you go with your harassment? No, I don't know anything about that. The TV was on normally when we left, wasn't it? We haven't been back since then, so it's impossible for us to have done it, I replied, but my mother-in-law kept accusing me. You and Summer are such a nuisance. Just divorce David already and go somewhere far away, the both of you.
My mother-in-law had lost all composure and was now demanding a divorce. As if it wasn't enough that she was bad-mouthing me, what had Summer ever done to her? She had conjured up this whole idea that David had been stolen from her, was jealous for no reason, and now she was demanding a divorce. I wanted to scream back at her, but there were a lot of people around. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of my family or others, so I took a deep breath to calm down. I deeply care about David, and I intend to continue living with him and Summer as a family of 3. Please don't talk nonsense about us getting a divorce, I stated clearly. And though you are David's mother, I have no desire to associate with someone who intentionally causes pain to others, I added, asking her not to be involved with us anymore. Still, my mother-in-law continued to scream irrational things, and I was about to hang up when my phone was taken by a hand reaching from the side. It was April who had taken my phone and started talking to our mother-in-law.
Hello, Mom? Yes, it's April. Actually, it was me who turned off the breaker. It must have saved on the electricity bill for the night, right? April explained with a smile. What, April, why?
My mother-in-law's voice was loud enough to be heard without putting the phone to my ear. She was confused about why April was with me and why she would do something like turning off the house's breaker. Mom, I've told you many times about not leaving the electricity on when you're not using it, haven't I? You always demand others to save but leave it on yourself. Even when I left, the TV and all the lights were on. Didn't I ask you if I should turn everything off because it's wasteful? You said it was okay. So, I turned it off. It saved electricity, so it's all good, right? April said, her face bright with relief. What do you mean? It's not okay. I have to replace all the food now. It's irreplaceable. April, come back home right now. It's fine. You can just buy it again, right? Maybe next time you'll get better ingredients. Mom, you always said saving electricity was more important than human lives, so I was just helping out. Anyway, I don't care anymore, so goodbye. I won't contact you again, but take care. April continued, ignoring our mother-in-law's cries, and ended the call. Sorry for talking so long. She apologized as she handed back my phone, and I shook my head. No, I feel much better now, I replied. It's almost time to board, isn't it? Take care over there. It's still hot these days, so watch your health. I told her as April nodded with a smile. April was moving far away today. Right now, I'm at the airport seeing her off with my family of 3. April had decided long ago to leave the overprotective care of our mother-in-law. The place she chose to move to is far from my mother-in-law's reach. April's face was bright as she embarked on her journey to her new world, and we waved her off with smiles. Since then, we've been keeping in touch with April, updating each other on our lives. She seems to be enjoying life in her new world, living each day with vigor. Shortly after April's departure, we also moved and started a new life in our new home. We didn't give our mother-in-law our new address and blocked her number, cutting off all ties, which has made our life considerably more comfortable. David had also been quite distressed by his mother's smothering love, but being her son, he had never been able to push her away until now. After the recent uproar, he decided it was time to make a clean break. My mother-in-law has become isolated from the community because she deliberately put Summer's life in danger and tried to deceive the neighbors with lies and slander about me. We moved without her knowledge, and since April also left home, my mother-in-law has no one to rely on. She seems to be living a lonely and depressed life, subsisting on my father-in-law's inheritance without any financial power. Whatever path she chooses to walk from here on out is beyond our knowledge. Oh, by the way, April mentioned she wants to come visit soon, I remembered. Just the other day, during a phone call, April invited us to her place, saying that she had settled into her new home and wanted us to visit. Let's use the long weekend next month to go see her. David agreed enthusiastically, and Summer, thrilled at the idea, exclaimed, I want to go. I want to ride on a plane. We're all looking forward to it. When we meet, I plan to tell her that she's going to have a new nephew. From now on, I want us to live a happy life as a family of 4, watching over Summer's growth and welcoming the new baby boy into our lives.